The rain hammered the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Seattle waterfront hotel like 1,000 unspoken regrets, each drop blurring the neon glow of the city below. Caden stood frozen in the shadow of the grand ballroom, his heart slamming against his ribs as Ethan turned, whiskey glass in hand, those steady gray eyes locking onto his with the weight of a lifetime neither had dared to claim. "I love you," Caden whispered, the words slipping out like a blade from its sheath, slicing through the hum of politicians and power brokers. "And I can't pretend anymore that this is just friendship." In that instant, the world narrowed to the space between them, the air thick with the scent of aged bourbon and damp wool coats, and Ethan, husband to Senator Olivia Hale, architect of progressive bills that reshaped the Pacific Northwest, did not pull away. Instead, his fingers brushed Caden's wrist, a touch so fleeting it might have been imagined, yet it ignited something irrevocable, a secret flame in the storm-swept heart of a city that thrived on hidden currents. Caden had always been the quiet force behind the scenes, the one who made the machinery of ambition hum without fanfare. At 28, with his olive skin kissed by Mediterranean roots, his immigrant parents had carried from Beirut to the rainy embrace of Seattle 2 decades prior. He blended into the backdrop of coffee shops and tech startups that dotted the Emerald City's veins. He worked as a policy aide for Senator Hale's office, buried in spreadsheets and strategy sessions, his days a rhythm of ferry rides across Puget Sound and late-night revisions under the glow of his laptop in a cramped Capitol Hill apartment. But Ethan Hale was the variable that upended every equation. Ethan, 35, with the broad-shouldered build of a man who hiked the Cascades on weekends to escape the Senate floor's sterile battles, had married Olivia 8 years ago in a ceremony overlooking Lake Washington, all white tents and string quartets under a rare blue sky. She was the firebrand, the voice thundering for climate reform and workers' rights, her sharp bob of auburn hair and tailored pantsuits a symbol of unyielding progress. Ethan, her rock, managed the quieter logistics. Donor calls, family logistics, the human glue that kept their public life seamless. To the world, he was the devoted spouse, the one who charmed at fundraisers with dry wit and a disarming smile. To Caden, he was the man who lingered too long over shared coffees, whose laughter in empty conference rooms carried an undercurrent of something deeper, unspoken. Their paths crossed 2 years earlier at a volunteer rally in Pioneer Square, where rain-slicked banners fluttered against brick walls etched with graffiti from forgotten protests. Caden, fresh out of a policy program at the University of Washington, had been handing out flyers on affordable housing, his voice steady but his hands trembling from the chill. Ethan had approached with a thermos of hot cider, mistaking him for a fellow organizer. "You look like you could use this more than I do," he'd said, his voice low and warm, cutting through the drizzle like sunlight. From there, it snowballed. Casual lunches at Pike Place Market, where the salt air mingled with the tang of fresh salmon. Strategy walks along the Burke-Gilman Trail, bikes locked and forgotten as conversations veered from bills to dreams deferred. Caden told himself it was professional admiration at first. Ethan was the kind of man who listened, not with the performative nods of politicians, but with the full tilt of his head, eyes crinkling at the corners as if memorizing every inflection. He shared stories of his upbringing in Spokane, the son of a mill worker and a schoolteacher, how he'd clawed his way to Yale on scholarships and grit, only to find the corridors of power colder than the Idaho winters. Caden opened up in return about the weight of his parents' expectations. The bakery they ran in Fremont, scented with cardamom and rosewater, where success meant stability, not the wild pulse of unspoken desires. But desire crept in like fog off the sound. A brush of knees under a diner table in Ballard, where neon signs buzzed like fireflies. A late-night text after a grueling session. "Couldn't sleep, thinking about what you said on equity gaps. You see the world clearer than most." Caden would stare at his phone in the dark, thumb hovering, heart a drumbeat against the silence. He was gay, out to a handful of friends in the city's vibrant queer scene at Capitol Hill bars like the Strangers Dive haunts, but to Ethan he was just Caden, the reliable aide, the friend who never pushed. The confession erupted on the eve of the state's midterms, at the Hale campaign gala in that waterfront hotel, where crystal chandeliers cast fractured light over tuxedos and gowns. Seattle's elite swirled. Tech moguls from Bellevue, union reps from the ports, activists with faded tattoos peeking from sleeves. Olivia held court near the bar, her laughter bright as she debated carbon taxes with a cluster of donors. Ethan had slipped away to the balcony for air, the city lights smearing into constellations below. Caden followed, drawn by the pull of gravity he could no longer deny. The words tumbled out amid the downpour's roar, raw and unpolished. Ethan's face shifted, shock rippling into something softer, unguarded. "Caden," he murmured, setting the glass down on the wet railing, his hand finding Caden's in the shadows. Their lips met then, tentative at first, tasting of whiskey and rain, then urgent, as if years of restraint dissolved in that stolen breath. It was a kiss that rewrote the map of their world, mapping territories neither had charted. They pulled apart at the sound of footsteps, hearts racing, promises unspoken hanging in the mist. "We can't," Ethan said, but his eyes said otherwise, dark with the same hunger. Caden nodded, slipping back into the crowd, the flavor of him lingering like salt on skin. That night, in his apartment overlooking the bustling streets of Capitol Hill, Caden lay awake, the city's hum a lullaby of possibility and peril. He traced the ceiling cracks with his gaze, imagining Ethan's hands instead of his own, the secret blooming like night jasmine in the dark. The days that followed were a delicate dance. Stolen glances across the office in the Smith Tower, where fog clung to the spires like a lover's breath. Texts coded in policy jargon. "Need your input on the amendment. Meet at the usual spot?" The usual spot became Elliott Bay Book Company, tucked in the shadow of the Ferris wheel, where they huddled over lattes, knees pressing under scarred wooden tables. Conversations deepened, peeling back layers. Ethan's quiet confession of a college fling with a roommate, buried under the weight of expectation. Caden's fear of disappointing his family, the bakery's warmth a cage of tradition. Lust simmered beneath the surface, manifesting in charged silences during drives to Olympia, the state capitol's marble halls echoing their footsteps. One afternoon, in a deserted hearing room, Ethan backed Caden against the oak-paneled wall, their mouths crashing together with the ferocity of pent-up storms. Hands roamed, fingers threading through hair, palms mapping the curve of hips, until voices in the hall forced them apart, breathless and undone. "This is madness?" Ethan whispered, forehead to forehead. But he smiled, a crooked thing full of wonder. Yet shadows loomed. Olivia noticed the shift, her keen eyes catching the way Ethan's gaze lingered on Caden during briefings. She attributed it to mentorship at first, praising Caden's sharp mind over family dinners at their Queen and Home, a modernist haven of glass and steel with views of the Olympics. Caden attended as the rising star. Plates of salmon and asparagus passed amid talk of polls and endorsements, but the proximity tortured him. Sitting across from Ethan, their feet brushing accidentally on purpose under the table, while Olivia's hand rested possessively on her husband's arm. Guilt gnawed at Caden like the relentless drizzle eroding sidewalks. He threw himself into work, drafting amendments on housing equity that echoed his own rootlessness. Nights found him at her place, the thump of bass and swirl of bodies a temporary salve, but no stranger's touch compared to Ethan's quiet intensity. Friends like Marcus, a barista-turned-graphic designer with a sleeve of intricate tattoos, pulled him aside one evening over IPAs at a Fremont microbrewery. "You're glowing, man, but it's got that haunted edge. Spill." Caden deflected with a laugh, but the words stuck, a mirror to his fracturing self. As autumn deepened, leaves turning the parks of Green Lake to fire, their affair ignited fully. A weekend retreat to the San Juan Islands, ostensibly for campaign strategy with a small team, but the others canceled last minute due to a ferry delay. Alone in a cedar cabin on Orcas, waves lapping the shore like whispers, they surrendered. Clothes shed in the firelight, bodies entwining on wool blankets scented with pine. Ethan's touch was reverent, exploring Caden's skin as if committing it to memory. Lips tracing collarbones, fingers eliciting gasps that mingled with the wind. "You're everything I didn't know I needed," Ethan breathed against his neck, and Caden shattered, pleasure and pain blurring in the release. In the afterglow, vulnerabilities surfaced. Ethan spoke of the marriage's slow erosion, Olivia's ambition a blaze that left little room for intimacy, their bond more partnership than passion. "I love her, in the way you love a cause," he admitted, tracing patterns on Caden's chest. "But this, it's alive." Caden confessed his fears, of being the other man, the secret that could topple lives built on trust. Yet in that island isolation, promises formed, discreet, fervent, to navigate the impossible. Back in Seattle, the idol fractured. Whispers circulated in the office. A junior staffer, Lena, with her sharp bob and sharper tongue, caught a too familiar glance during a holiday mixer at the Four Seasons. She said nothing then, but her eyes narrowed, filing it away like evidence in a case. Olivia, campaigning harder as polls tightened, leaned on Ethan more, her exhaustion manifesting in clipped words and late-night arguments audible through thin campaign trail hotel walls. Caden overheard one in Boise, during a swing through the Midwest. "You're distracted, Ethan. Is it the job or something else?" Doubt crept in, poisoning the stolen moments. A hurried encounter in the office supply closet, palms pressed to mouths to stifle moans, left Caden hollow, the thrill tainted by deceit. He pulled back, citing deadlines, but Ethan pursued, cornering him in the rooftop garden of their building, evergreens rustling in the wind. "Don't shut me out," Ethan pleaded, voice cracking. "We're in this together." Caden relented, their kiss desperate, but the seed of betrayal had taken root elsewhere. It was Lena who struck first, her ambition a blade honed by years in the cutthroat world of politics. Overheard in a Capitol Hill cafe, she confided to a rival aide from a conservative pack, "Hale's got skeletons. Her husband's playing house with the pretty policy boy." The leak spread like oil on water, anonymous tips to local blogs, then national outlets sniffing for scandal. By New Year's, as fireworks burst over the Space Needle, a grainy photo surfaced online. Caden and Ethan, arms linked on that Orcas ferry dock, timestamps damning. The fallout was swift, a tempest in the teacup of American excess. Olivia's team went into lockdown, statements drafted in frantic all-nighters. She confronted Ethan in their living room, the city lights mocking through floor-to-ceiling windows. "How long?" she demanded, voice steel wrapped in silk. Ethan, pale and unraveling, confessed fragments, sparing the depths but admitting enough. Olivia's face hardened, not with rage, but a profound, weary betrayal. "I built this for us," she said. "And you let it crumble for what? A fling?" Caden, holed up in his apartment, watched the storm unfold on his screen. Headlines screaming, "Senator's marriage in crisis amid alleged affair." Calls from reporters jammed his line. His parents, bewildered, left voicemails in accented English, pleading for explanation. Marcus arrived with takeout and tequila, holding him as sobs racked his frame. "You didn't deserve this exposure," his friend murmured, but Caden knew better. The secrecy had always been a ticking bomb. Ethan reached out once, a single text, "Meet me at the pier, please." Caden went, the waterfront desolate under January's gray shroud, gulls wheeling like accusations. Ethan's eyes were red-rimmed, coat collar turned up against the bite. "She's filing for separation," he said flatly. "The campaign's hanging by a thread. And you, God, Caden, I never meant to hurt you like this." The words ignited Caden's fury, long suppressed. "You think this is about hurt? You chose her world over ours, every time. I was the escape, not the life." They argued until voices echoed off the pilings, raw truth spilling. Ethan's terror of appending his identity, the straight-laced facade cracked irreparably. Caden's rage at being the catalyst for chaos, his career in tatters as aides distanced themselves. In the end, Ethan walked away, shoulders slumped, leaving Caden alone with the tide's indifferent pull. The confession that sparked their love now drowned it, waves of regret crashing over him. Winter dragged on, a slog of depositions and therapy sessions in Caden's dimly lit apartment, where the scent of his parents' delivered baklava clashed with the stale air of isolation. He quit the hill job, the marble corridors too haunted by ghosts of what-ifs. Freelance gigs trickled in, consulting for nonprofits on equity initiatives, but the fire in his belly dimmed, replaced by a hollow ache. Nights blurred into mornings at therapy, unpacking the shame of desire criminalized by circumstance. "You loved boldly," his counselor, a soft-spoken woman named Rita with silver streaks in her braid, urged. "Now learn to love yourself first." Spring thawed the city slowly, cherry blossoms unfurling along University Avenue like tentative apologies. Caden volunteered at a youth center in the Central District, mentoring queer teens navigating their own hidden worlds. Workshops on coming out, art sessions where sketches captured unspoken yearnings. In Jamal, A 17-year-old with a fade haircut and eyes full of fire. He saw echoes of his younger self, fierce yet fragile. "How do you know when it's worth the risk?" the boy asked one rainy afternoon, crayons scattered like fallen leaves. Caden paused, rain pattering the roof like Morse code. "You listen to the part of you that whispers truth, even when it screams." The words, drawn from his own scars, steadied him. He reconnected with Marcus. Their friendship a buoy, game nights at board shops in Georgetown, hikes up Rattlesnake Ledge where vistas stretched to infinity, mirroring the slow reclaiming of his spirit. Ethan's absence was a phantom limb, throbbing in quiet moments. A familiar stride in a crowd, the low timbre of a voice on the radio. News filtered through. Olivia's campaign pivoted, her resolve stealing into a narrative of resilience, polls rebounding on sympathy waves. Ethan vanished from public view, rumored to be in Spokane with family, rebuilding in the shadow of pines. Caden resisted the urge to search, instead journaling feverishly. Pages filled with unsent letters, elegies to a love that burned too bright. Healing came in fragments. A solo trip to the Hoh rainforest, where moss-draped trees whispered of endurance, roots entwining unseen. There, under the canopy's emerald hush, Caden forgave. Not Ethan, not fully, but himself, for daring to want. Back in Seattle, he started dating tentatively. Coffee with Theo, a librarian with a gentle laugh and shared love for indie films at SIFF. Walks with Riley, a barista whose freckles danced like constellations. No one filled the void, but each step lightened the load. Summer arrived with ferocity, festivals crowding Fremont's solstice parades, drums echoing Caden's quickening pulse. At a pride event in California Anderson Park, rainbows arching over throngs of bodies free in their skins. He spotted Ethan across the lawn, thinner, grayer at the temples, but unmistakably him. Their eyes met, a current arcing through the crowd. Ethan approached slowly, hands in pockets, voice tentative. "I've missed you, every damn day." Caden's heart clenched, old wounds pulsing. What now? The world's moved on. But Ethan's gaze held steady, stripped of pretense. "I left the marriage, filed the papers last month. And the job. I'm done with the shadows. I want real Caden. With you if you'll have me." The confession reversed, no longer a spark but a steady flame. They talked for hours on a bench, voices weaving through laughter and chants. Apologies, dreams deferred, the human mess of starting over. Olivia, in a twist of grace born from her own reckoning, reached out weeks later via email. A measured note acknowledging the pain, wishing paths untangled toward growth. "We were allies once," she wrote. "Be that for each other now." No vitriol, just the quiet dignity of a woman reshaping her narrative. As fall painted the city in golds and crimsons, Caden and Ethan rebuilt tentatively. Dinners at hidden gems in the International District, chopsticks clinking over stories of the interim, Ethan's therapy in the wheat fields, his new venture consulting for rural co-ops, Caden's deepened roots in community work, his manuscript on policy through a queer lens taking shape. Intimacy returned, slower, sacred. Mornings tangled in Ethan's new loft in Belltown, salt air drifting through open windows, bodies learning each other anew without the weight of secrets. The love that ignited in confession matured into something human, flawed, enduring. In a nation of fractured facades, they chose visibility, not as spectacle but as quiet revolution. Caden's parents, after tearful dinners scented with fresh pita, embraced Ethan with tentative warmth, the bakery's oven yielding to new recipes shared. At a small gathering in Discovery Park, waves crashing below as sunset bled into dusk, Ethan knelt. Not in grand gesture, but with the simplicity of truth. "Will you build this life with me?" Ring simple, silver band etched with coordinates of that Orcas cabin. Caden said yes, tears salting his smile, the horizon vast with promise. In the end, their story wasn't the scandal that nearly broke them, but the healing that mended, not just hearts, but the invisible threads binding a city, a country, to compassion's quiet power.